I never thought a single word could break a person until the day I stood in the cold, damp alley behind the Boulangerie Laurent in Lyon, my hands trembling as I clutched the crumpled job application in my fingers. The wind howled through the narrow streets, carrying with it the scent of freshly baked bread and the bitter sting of failure. Monsieur Laurent had just looked me up and down, his lips curling into a sneer as he said, "You're useless without a car. How do you expect to deliver anything?" Those words echoed in my mind like a death knell, and for a moment I felt smaller than the rats scurrying past my feet. I was 24, broke, and utterly alone in a city that had promised me a fresh start. But Lyon didn't care about promises. It only cared about what you could offer, and right then, I had nothing. The thing is, I had always believed in hard work. My mother, God rest her soul, used to say, "A man's worth isn't measured by what he owns, but by what he's willing to do." She raised me in a tiny village in Provence, where the only car we ever had was a rusted old Peugeot that barely ran. When she passed, I sold it for scrap to pay for her funeral, and that was that. I arrived in Lyon with nothing but a backpack, a heart full of dreams, and the stubborn belief that I could build something from nothing. But the city had a way of grinding dreams into dust. Every job I applied for required a car, a license, something I didn't have. And every rejection chipped away at my confidence until I started to wonder if maybe they were right. Maybe I was useless. That evening I sat on the steps of the Basilica de Notre-Dame de Fourvière, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The city sprawled beneath me, alive and indifferent. I thought about calling my old friend Claude back in Marseille. He'd always been the optimistic one, the one who believed in me even when I didn't, but pride kept my fingers still. What would I say? "Hey, Claude, remember how I said I'd make it on my own? Well, I can't even get a job delivering bread." The shame burned worse than the cold. Then something unexpected happened. An elderly woman, her silver hair tied back in a loose bun, sat down beside me. She didn't say a word at first, just pulled out a small loaf of bread from her bag and tore it in half, offering me a piece. "You look like you could use this," she said, in a voice that carried the weight of years. I hesitated, but the growling in my stomach betrayed me. I took it, murmuring a thank you. "I've seen you around," she continued, her eyes sharp but kind. "You're the boy who's been asking for work at all the shops, aren't you?" I nodded, too tired to lie. She studied me for a long moment before speaking again. "You know, my husband used to say the same thing about cars. Said a man without one was like a bird without wings. But he forgot one thing. Birds can still run, and sometimes running is all you need to do to find your way." Her words struck something deep inside me. Maybe it was the way she said it, or maybe it was the sheer exhaustion of feeling like the world had already decided my fate. But for the first time in weeks I felt a flicker of something, anger maybe, or determination. "What if I don't want to run?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if I want to fly?" She smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "Then you'll have to find a different kind of wings." And just like that, she stood up, brushed the crumbs from her hands and walked away, leaving me with more questions than answers. That night, I lay on the thin mattress of my tiny rented room, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. The woman's words played over and over in my mind. A different kind of wings. What did that even mean? I didn't have a car. I didn't have connections. All I had was a pair of hands and a desperate need to prove, if only to myself, that I wasn't as useless as they said. And then, like a spark in the dark, an idea came to me. It was crazy. It was risky. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like hope. The next morning I woke up with a purpose. The idea that had kept me up all night was still there, pulsing in my chest like a second heartbeat. I didn't have a car, but Lyon had something else, something no one else seemed to see. The city was built on hills with narrow, winding streets that cars struggled to navigate. But a bicycle could weave through traffic, cut across parks, slip down alleys. It could go places cars couldn't. And if I couldn't deliver bread by car, maybe I could deliver something else, something faster, something the city needed. I spent the last of my savings on a used bicycle from a shop near the Place des Terreaux. It wasn't much, a beat-up old thing with a rusted chain and a wobbly front wheel, but it was mine. The shop owner, a gruff man named Henri, eyed me skeptically as he handed over the keys. "Are you planning on racing in the Tour de France with that thing?" he joked, but I just grinned. "No," I said, "I'm planning on changing my life." He chuckled and shook his head, but there was a glint of respect in his eyes. I didn't waste any time. I printed out flyers on the cheap at the local library, fast, reliable, anywhere in Lyon, call me, and stuck them up on every lamppost, cafe window and bulletin board I could find. I even slipped a few under the doors of the bakeries that had turned me away. It was a gamble, but I had nothing left to lose. The first few days were brutal. I pedaled until my legs burned, my lungs ached, and my hands were raw from gripping the handlebars. I delivered groceries, documents, even a birthday cake that nearly slid off the back rack as I skidded to a stop in the rain. But with every delivery, word spread. People started recognizing me. The kid on the bike who never said no, who always showed up with a smile no matter the weather. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. I was rushing through the Presqu'île, the heart of Lyon, when I saw a crowd gathered outside the Hôtel de Ville. A woman was standing on the steps, her face pale with panic. "My daughter," she cried, her voice breaking. "She's missing. She was supposed to meet me here an hour ago, but she never showed up." My stomach dropped. I knew that fear, the kind that claws at your throat and steals your breath. Without thinking, I jumped off my bike. "Where was she last?" I asked. The woman turned to me, her eyes wild. "Near the Parc de la Tête d'Or. She's only 8. Please, someone has to help." The police had been called, but they were tied up with a protest downtown. No one else stepped forward. I looked at my bike, then back at the woman. "I'll find her," I said. And just like that, I was off, pedaling faster than I ever had before. The park was huge, a labyrinth of trees and winding paths, but I knew it well. I'd delivered there before. I shouted her name, my voice hoarse with fear, until I heard a whimper near the lake. There she was, a tiny girl with tear-streaked cheeks, her knee scraped and bleeding. "Maman sent you?" she sniffled. I nodded, scooping her up onto the bike. "She's waiting for you," I said, my heart pounding. "Hold on tight." When I returned, the woman collapsed to her knees, sobbing as she pulled her daughter into her arms. "Thank you," she whispered, pressing a wad of euros into my hand. I tried to refuse. This wasn't about money, but she insisted. "You saved her," she said. "No one else would help." As I watched them walk away, I realized something. This was why I was here. Not just to deliver bread or packages, but to be there when it mattered. To be the one who showed up. But not everyone saw it that way. The next day, as I was locking up my bike outside the Marché des Jacobins, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Well, well, if it isn't the useless boy who thinks he can run a business with a bicycle. I turned to see Monsieur Laurent, the baker who had rejected me, standing there with a smug grin. "Heard you've been making quite the spectacle of yourself," he sneered. "Playing hero, are we? Or just desperate for attention?" His words stung, but I refused to let him see it. "I'm just doing what needs to be done," I said calmly. "Something you wouldn't understand." His face darkened. "You watch your mouth, boy. People like you don't last long in this city. You'll fail, just like all the others." I wanted to argue, to tell him about the lives I'd touched, the difference I was making, but something held me back. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was the nagging fear that he was right. That night, as I lay in bed, my body aching from another long day, I couldn't shake his words. What if this was all just a fluke? What if in the end I was just a boy on a bike, chasing a dream that would never come true? If you've ever felt like the world was against you, like no matter how hard you tried, you just couldn't catch a break, then you know how I felt in that moment. But here's the thing. Sometimes the very thing that makes us feel small is the thing that makes us strong. And if you're watching this, if you've ever been told you're not enough, I want you to know something. You are not alone. This channel is more than just stories. It's a place for people who refuse to give up, who keep fighting even when the world tells them to stop. So if this story resonates with you, if it makes you feel seen, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, not because I'm asking, but because you deserve to be part of a community that believes in second chances. and leave a comment below. Tell me about a time someone underestimated you and how you proved them wrong. I read every single one, and I promise your story matters. The days that followed were a blur of exhaustion and determination. Every morning I woke up before dawn, my muscles still screaming from the day before, but my mind sharp with purpose. The city was starting to notice me, not just as the boy on the bike, but as someone who could be counted on. I delivered more than just packages. I delivered hope, relief, sometimes even joy. Like the time I raced across town to bring a widow her late husband's last letter, or when I helped a young couple surprise their parents with a long-lost family heirloom. Each delivery felt like a small victory, a proof that I was carving out a place for myself in this city that had once seemed so indifferent. But Monsieur Laurent's words still haunted me. No matter how many smiles I earned or how many thank yous I received, his voice lingered in the back of my mind, whispering that it wouldn't last, that I wasn't enough. And then, one evening, as I was locking up my bike outside my usual spot near the Rue de la République, I noticed something strange. A group of men, Monsieur Laurent among them, were huddled together in the shadows, their voices low and urgent. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the tension in the air was palpable. Something was wrong. Curiosity got the better of me. I pretended to fiddle with my bike chain, inching closer until I could make out their words. "We can't let this go on," one of them muttered. "He's taking all our business. People are choosing him over us." My stomach twisted. They were talking about me. Monsieur Laurent's eyes flicked in my direction, and for a second I thought he'd seen me. But he didn't react. "We need to put a stop to this," he said, his voice cold. "One way or another." I didn't wait to hear more. I jumped on my bike and pedaled away as fast as I could, my heart pounding. Fear clawed at my throat, but beneath it something else burned. Anger. How dare they? How dare they try to tear down something I'd built with my own hands, my own sweat? That night I lay awake, my mind racing. I could walk away. I could let them win, let their fear and jealousy chase me out of Lyon. Or I could fight back. But how? The answer came the next morning, in the most unexpected way. As I was making my usual rounds, I noticed a flyer taped to a lamppost. Lyon's annual entrepreneur fair. Pitch your business, win a grant. My hands trembled as I tore it down. This was it. This was my chance to prove, not just to myself but to the entire city, that I wasn't just a boy on a bike. I was a businessman, a problem solver, someone who made a difference. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I mapped out my routes, calculated my earnings, gathered testimonials from the people I'd helped. I even borrowed a suit from a thrift store, determined to look the part. The night before the fair, I stood in front of the mirror, practicing my pitch over and over. "My name is Lucas Moreau," I'd say, "and I run Lyon's fastest, most reliable delivery service. No car required." It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about proving that kindness, hard work, and a little creativity could triumph over cynicism and fear. The day of the fair arrived, and the Palais de la Bourse was packed with people, entrepreneurs, investors, journalists. My palms were slick with sweat as I waited my turn, my stomach churning. And then there he was, Monsieur Laurent, standing near the front of the crowd, his arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. He hadn't expected me to be here. None of them had. When it was my turn, I stepped onto the stage, my legs shaking. The judges looked bored, already glancing at their watches. But I took a deep breath and began. 2 months ago, I said, I was told I was useless because I didn't have a car. But I refused to believe that, because I knew something they didn't. Sometimes the things that make us different are the very things that make us strong. The room fell silent. I told them my story. Not just the struggles, but the victories. The little girl I'd found in the park. The widow's letter. The couples, the families, the small business owners who relied on me. "I don't have a car," I said, "but I have something better. I have a city that trusts me. And that's worth more than any vehicle." The judges were stunned. One of them, a woman with sharp eyes and a kind smile, leaned forward. "Lucas," she said, "what you've built isn't just a business. It's a lifeline, and that's something Lyon needs." The room erupted into applause. I looked over at Monsieur Laurent, whose face had gone pale. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes. Not anger, but fear. Fear that I had done the impossible. Fear that he had been wrong. By the end of the day, I didn't just win the grant. I won something far more valuable. Respect. Reporters wanted to interview me. Business owners wanted to partner with me. And as I stood there, surrounded by people who finally saw me for who I truly was, I realized something. The city hadn't been against me, it had been waiting for me to show it what I was made of. If this story has touched you, if it's made you think about the times you've been underestimated or the moments you've risen above, I want to hear from you. This channel isn't just about my stories, it's about ours. So take a moment and share your own journey in the comments below. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something only to prove everyone wrong? Or maybe you're still fighting, still pushing forward even when the world doubts you. Whatever it is, your story deserves to be heard. And who knows, it might just be the inspiration someone else needs to keep going. Let's make this a place where we lift each other up, where we remind one another that no dream is too small and no obstacle is too great. You're not just a viewer, you're family, and family sticks together. The weeks after the fair were a whirlwind. My life had changed in ways I never could have imagined. The grant money allowed me to expand, hire 2 more riders, upgrade my bikes, even rent a small office near the Vieux Lyon. But more than the money or the recognition, it was the way people looked at me now. Strangers would stop me on the street to thank me, not just for the deliveries, but for proving that kindness and determination could still win in a world that often felt cold and unforgiving. I'd smile, nod, and keep moving, but inside I was still the same boy from Provence who had arrived in Lyon with nothing but a backpack and a prayer. One evening, as I was closing up the office, I heard a knock at the door. I turned to see Monsieur Laurent standing there, his hat in his hands, his expression unreadable. For a moment I thought about turning him away. After everything he'd said, everything he'd done, he didn't deserve my time. But something in his eyes stopped me. He looked broken. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside to let him in. He sat down across from me, his fingers fidgeting with the brim of his hat. "I was wrong," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "About you. About everything." I didn't say anything, I just waited. I've spent my whole life believing that success meant having the right tools, the right connections. That if you didn't have those things, you didn't stand a chance. He looked up at me, his eyes glistening. "But you showed me that's not true. You showed me that sometimes all you need is heart." I didn't know what to say. All the anger, all the bitterness I'd felt toward him seemed to melt away in that moment. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked softly. He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Because I saw my son today. He's 18, full of dreams, just like you were. And I realized I'd been teaching him all the wrong things. I'd been teaching him to fear failure, to see the world as a place where only the strong survive. But you've shown me that strength isn't about what you have. It's about who you are." His words hit me harder than I expected. I thought about my own journey, about the moments I'd wanted to give up, the times I'd felt like the world was conspiring against me. And yet here I was. Not because I'd had some grand advantage, but because I'd refused to let fear dictate my path. "What changed?" I asked him. He smiled faintly. "You did. And I want to make it right, if you'll let me." The next morning, Monsieur Laurent showed up at my office with a fresh batch of bread, still warm, the crust golden and crisp. "For your team," he said, placing the basket on the table, "a peace offering." I accepted it, and we shook hands. It wasn't an instant fix for the past, but it was a start. And sometimes that's all you need. As the days turned into weeks, I began to notice something else changing, not just in me, but in the people around me. The riders I'd hired, Jacques and Amélie, weren't just employees. They were partners, friends. Jacques, a former mechanic, had a knack for fixing bikes and a heart as big as his laugh. Amélie, a young art student, brought creativity to our routes, mapping out deliveries like they were works of art. Together, we weren't just a business. We were a family. And that family was growing. One afternoon, as we were gathered in the office, Amélie looked up from her sketchbook, her eyes bright with excitement. "I have an idea," she said. "What if we didn't just deliver things? What if we delivered stories?" Jacques raised an eyebrow. "Stories," she nodded. "Think about it. Every package, every letter, every item we deliver has a story behind it. What if we shared those stories? What if we reminded people that behind every delivery there's a human connection?" I leaned back in my chair, letting her words sink in. It was brilliant. It was exactly what we needed to take this to the next level. "Let's do it," I said. "But we don't just share the stories. We celebrate them. We make people feel like they're part of something bigger." And just like that, our mission evolved. We weren't just delivering goods anymore. We were delivering hope, one story at a time. A year later, I stood on the steps of the Hôtel de Ville, looking out at the crowd that had gathered for the launch of our new initiative, Lyon Delivers Hope. It was more than a business. It was a movement, a reminder that no matter how small you feel, no matter how many times the world tells you you're not enough, you have the power to change your story. The mayor was there, along with reporters, customers, and even a few of the people who had once doubted me. Monsieur Laurent was in the front row, his bakery now one of our biggest partners. As I spoke, I thought about the boy I'd been a year ago, the one who had stood in that same alley, trembling with fear and shame. "I used to think that success was about having the right tools," I said, my voice steady and sure. "But I've learned that the only tool you truly need is the belief that you are capable of more than you imagine, that no matter how many times you're knocked down, you have the strength to get back up." The crowd erupted into applause, and I felt a warmth spread through me. This was why I was here. Not for the money, not for the fame, but for this moment of connection, of shared hope. After the event, as the crowd dispersed, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous, her hands clutching a worn-out notebook. I heard your story," she stammered, "and I wanted to thank you. Because of you, I started my own business. It's small, just a little cafe, but it's mine. And for the first time in my life, I feel like I belong somewhere." I smiled, touched by her words. "That's what this is all about," I said. "Not just changing my story, but helping others change theirs." As she walked away, I glanced down at the notebook she'd left behind. Inside, on the first page, were the words, "To Lucas, who taught me that wings come in all shapes and sizes." I closed it gently, my heart full. That night, as I sat on the steps of the Basilica de Notre-Dame de Fourvière once again, I thought about how far I'd come. The city that had once felt so cold and unwelcoming now felt like home, not because it had changed, but because I had. I'd learned that the things that make us different, the things that others might see as weaknesses, are often our greatest strengths. My lack of a car hadn't held me back. It had forced me to find another way. And in doing so, I'd discovered something far more valuable than any vehicle. I'd discovered myself. If this story has resonated with you, if it's made you think about the times you've been knocked down only to rise stronger, I want to leave you with a question. What's the one thing the world has told you you're not good enough to do? And what would happen if you proved them wrong? Share your story in the comments below. Whether it's a dream you're chasing, a battle you're fighting, or a moment that changed everything, I want to hear it. Because this channel isn't just about my journey, it's about ours. And together we can remind each other that no dream is too small, no obstacle too great, and no person too useless to make a difference. So tell me, what's the story you're ready to rewrite?